Yeah.
You just don't know what it's called.
Yeah, it's like yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, I got it. No worries. I can see it. All right, so this is using the square root property. Oops, hold on.
Yeah.
Using the square root property to solve quadratic equations. That's what we're doing here. So to do this, you are going to, let me write this a little bit. Is this a picture here that you've shared with me, or an
No, I
image?
wrote that.
Okay, you wrote it. All right, that sounds good. I just can't, for some reason, I can't see it very well. So, but I can understand what you're doing. I'm just going to do them real quick, and then I'll back teach it to you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So first of all, it says use the square root property to solve the quadratics. You can't really use the square root property as this one is right here, or as this one is, unless you do something called completing the square. Has she taught you that yet?
She might have, like, I was reading over like the textbook and everything, and like those were like the example problems, and I was like, what?
Okay. Well, let me just explain it to you real quick, and then you can tell me if it looks familiar. This one you can do. You can use the square root property to do this because there is no linear term. This is called the linear term. See how there's just an x with that, not an x squared?
Yeah.
You see that? So this is called the quadratic term. Terms are things being added. This is the linear term, and this is the constant term. You can't solve by using you can solve using the square root property when you have no linear term, or when it's written in a different form than this. So the only one you can do is this one right here. So how do you solve it? I'll solve that for you real quick, and then we'll show you how to do the other ones. The way you solve it is you isolate the x. And the first thing you have to get rid of, there's three things to get rid of: the 9, the 2, and the -7. Which one would I get rid of first? Do you know?
7.
That's right. And how do I get rid of 7?
Adding it to both sides.
Very good. And when I do that, my equation will look like this, right?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Now what do I get rid of?
The 9.
Good. By doing what?
Dividing it.
Perfect. And there we go. And now what do I get rid of?
The square.
By doing what?
Square root.
That's right. And that's the square root property. Okay.
Okay.
So x equals plus or minus the square root of 7/9, which equals plus or minus the square root of 7/3. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense? But you can't do that for this right here. You can't move the 3 and the -4 over. That won't help you, because then you'll still have an x over here and an x over here. And you want to solve for just one x. You want to get the x by itself, consolidate the x. Okay. So this won't be solved by the square root property. Now, if you've learned how to complete the square, which I can teach you, but I don't want to teach that to you if you haven't learned it yet, because it's really confusing.
Yeah, I don't think we
teach it
did.
to you.
I don't think we went over that.
Okay. Let me
I don't think
explain
we
how to
learned
do it
it.
with this one just real quick.
Okay.
This one's not too bad to do. What you would do is you would take half of the b term. So take half of that, which is 3, and square it, and add it and subtract it. So that's what you're going to take. So my original problem is x squared plus 6x minus 2 equals -2 equals 0. And I'm leaving some space here because what I'm doing is I'm going to add 9 and then subtract 9. Why 9? Because that's half of b squared. Whoops. So do you see how I'm keeping my equation in balance here? I'm just adding and subtracting something to the same side. Now you might say, well, why would you do that? Well, you would do that because now what can you do with this right here? What can that factor into? That can factor into x plus 3 squared. Do you see how I factored that?
Yeah.
It's x plus 3 times x plus 3, which is x plus 3 squared. And then now these things add up to -11. And now do you see how this is different than this? Do you see how I only have one x here? I don't have two x terms.
Yeah.
I just have one x term. That's called completing the square. That's what that's called. CTS, complete the square. Okay. And why would I want to do that? Well, now I can solve this for x by getting rid of 11. Now what do I do?
Would you do the square root, or would you like?
That's right. Good job. No, you'd have to do the square root now. Don't forget the plus or minus. And now what do I do?
Subtract 3. Oh,
very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And there, you see how I have two answers now? Those are my two answers. So if she really wanted you to solve with the square root property, that would require that you do what's called the completing the square so that you can use the square root property, which I just used right here.
Yeah.
But I don't know that she wanted you to do that. She might
Yeah,
have.
I think it might have just been in like the actual textbook, but we didn't do it in class.
Okay. Well, now you know what's called completing the square. I just taught you how to do that. If that made sense, great. If it didn't, you'll learn it again in class. Completing the square is a little bit trickier when you've got a leading coefficient other than 1. See how in front of 2x squared, I'm assuming there was a 1 there. There wasn't a 1 here. It's a little bit harder. It can still be done, but it requires an extra step. A little bit trickier. But the better way to solve this one is if it factors, factor it. And if it doesn't factor, use the quadratic formula. Have you learned the quadratic formula?
Yeah, but that's like one of my next questions on like other slides.
So let me show it to you with this one. The quadratic formula, it gives you negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It's just basically you plug in and then you simplify. And this is your a, this is your a, this is your b, and this is your c. So the solutions will be just plug them in and you'll find the solutions. So x equals negative b, the opposite of b is positive 4. Got it? B squared is 16 minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a, and a was 2. So now we just have to simplify this. So 4 times 2 is 8 times 3 is 24. That's a negative number. So what does that mean? It means, so negative 24, so negative 8 all over 4. And is that a real number? Can you take the square root of a negative number? No. So you would say no real solutions or something like that. I don't know how your teacher wants you to say it, but unless she's taught you how to find complex solutions, and then you just write the complex solutions, which means you could take the square root of a negative number. Have you talked about that yet?
Yeah, that's what unit we're on right now, like complex numbers and stuff.
All right, great. So ignore that. We can find the solution, and the solution for this is you just take the I out and you call it, first of all, you take the I out. Have you learned how to simplify this as 2 times 4, which is just 2 times root 2? Have you learned how to do that? Perfect. Yeah. So I'm going to show you that. So that's 4 plus or minus. It's going to be 2 root 2 times I all over 4. And then you can simplify this even more because the 4 and the 2 and the 4 all have a 2 factor of 2. So I can factor that out. So my answer is really 2 plus or minus root 2i. And actually, I think your book usually puts the I in front of the root 2.
Yeah.
I root 2 all over 2. So there's your 2 answers. One answer is the positive, one answer is with the negative.
Yeah.
Okay. That help?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's look at some more problems and just work through them. Complete the square. Oh yeah, look. They did say complete the square. So they want you to complete the square. So let me just do that again real quick. For this one, you wouldn't complete the square. There's no reason to do that because all you have to do is factor out an x. So eventually what you're going to have to learn how to do is solve it by the best method possible. And it just takes practice. So x
Okay.
times x minus 3. See how I factored an x out?
Yeah.
And now that I have this times this and use the zero product property, you understand that? That means that
Yeah.
either x equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0, which means x equals 0 or x equals 3, positive 3. So that's the first one. So that you didn't have to complete the square on that. Yeah, see, look over here to the right. Know when to use what. That's what I'm talking about. So for this
Okay,
one,
yeah.
it's not, it doesn't factor. It doesn't factor. You can tell that pretty quickly. It doesn't factor. You can't use the square root property, at least not how it is right here. So either you're going to have to use the quadratic formula or complete the square. Those are your two options for at least for this one. So let me do both of them real quick so you can see, and then you can pick whichever one you think is better. So remember what I taught you? Take half of this, which is 3, and square it, which is 9, add it, and subtract it to that same side. I'm going to just do it in shorthand up here. So this factors to what?
X plus 3 squared.
Perfect. And then what's negative 2 minus 9?
Negative 11.
Very good. Whoops. Let me keep that in yellow. So that's minus 11, and that equals 0. And now how do I solve this?
Adding the 11.
Good.
And then
so x plus 3 squared equals 11. Then what?
square root.
Don't forget the
Both
plus or
sides.
minus. Then what?
Add 3 to both sides. Subtract it. Yeah.
I knew you knew that. Good. Now let's do it the other way. Let's do it with quadratic formula. Okay. So the quadratic formula, it would be x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, which equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 8 is what?
44.
44. Good. All over 2. Simplify that. Negative 6 plus or minus. 44 is 4 times 11. So 4 square root of 4 is 2. So I have 11 that stays in there. You follow how I did that?
Yeah.
Okay. And what cancels out here?
The 2's.
And my answer is negative 3 plus or minus root 11. Same answer. So which way was easier? Some people like completing the square. Some people like quadratic formula. Up to you, really. Let's do the last one. Which way is going to be easier for this one? Is this the same thing that we just saw? Did we just see this already?
I think so.
Are they
Or
the same
something
3
similar.
problems? Yeah, it's something similar. So I'll show you how to complete the square on this one. It's a little trickier because you first have to factor out the 2. So take a 2 out of the 2x terms. So that would be 2x would be left there. You get that?
Mm-hmm.
And then notice that I didn't factor it out of the 3. I just factored it out of the 2x terms. And now I'm going to do that same little trick. I'm going to take half of that. What's half of negative 2?
Negative 1.
Square it. What's negative 1 squared?
1.
Good. So I'm going to add 1 to this. And I'm also going to add, remember how I also added to the outside?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, subtract it from the outside to keep it balanced. Right? The problem is I didn't only really introduce a 1. What else did I introduce into this? Because the 2 was factored out. What did I really introduce here? I really introduced a 2 times a 1, didn't I?
Oh.
So I don't.
Yeah.
You see that? So I don't only subtract the 1. I subtract 2 times 1. That makes sense? Because that's really what I've done here. I've really introduced a 2 times 1. I've introduced a 2 here, and so I'm going to subtract the 2 here so that it keeps it balanced. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So now this would factor into simplifying this, this would be 2 times x minus 1 squared. And plus 3 minus 2 is a positive 1 equals 0. So there's my equation now, my simplified equation in the completed square form. And now I do the same thing, right? First add or subtract 1 from both sides. Whoops, minus, not plus. Got it. Now divide by 2. Keep doing that. Divide by 2, so negative 1/2. Now take the square root. Now what's the problem with taking the square root of a negative?
It's complex.
Yep, it's imaginary, or it's complex. Good. So I have to change this, right? I have to rewrite this. So that means x equals 1. Oh, don't forget the plus or minus. 1 plus or minus I square root of 1/2. Does your teacher want you to rationalize the denominator, or is she okay with you writing square root of 1/2?
She probably wants us to rationalize it.
All right, so square root of 1/2 is like saying square root of 1 over square root of 2, and then you're going to multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 2, and that's going to make the bottom 2, right? Because square root of 2 times square root of 2 is really square root of 4, which is just 2, and then the top just is bigger. So that simplifies to 1 plus or minus I root 2 over 2. So that's the answer for that one. Now you could have also done that problem, which I would recommend. Instead of doing it this way, you could have done it with the quadratic formula.
Yeah.
That's probably the better way to do it if there's a leading coefficient other than 1. Quadratic formula is just going to be easier. It's still going to be a little messy, but it'll be easier. So x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Got it? Which equals 4 plus or minus the square root of, now this is going to be a negative number again, right? I know it because of the original. So that's what, 24, is this the same thing? Negative 8, is this the same problem we had before? Over 4, right? Which is going to simplify how? That's going to simplify into 4 plus or minus I 2 root 2 all over 4. And then these are going to cancel out, the 4 and the 2 and the 4, and there's going to be a 2 and 2. So this is just 2 plus or minus I root 2 over 2, which is the same as what we did up there. It's just not distributed. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. I know I said that super fast, but that's why I record it. So you can go back, watch it again later. If you didn't follow what I said, go back, because I'm usually pretty careful with how I write it or how I'm saying it, and I'm doing it. I know it's super fast, but did you follow what I did? Follow most of it? Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Feeling good about it then?
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. You can stay on real quick for a second. Let's hope this worked okay.